by Professor Slavoj Zizek, International Director of the Birkbeck Institute for the Humanities. My name is Hester Leslie, and I co-direct the Institute with Professor Jacqueline Rhodes. So I'll say very little, as I know you are here in person and there are people online come to hear Slavoj Zizek. And he is very well known. He remains, as ever, intellectually prolific. I think the most recent English language publication I noticed came out a few days ago. Is that 0 Point?
Yeah.
Yeah, came out on the 20th, dealing with the question of political defeat and disaster and how to begin again and again. So the sessions with us come under the heading, What is Liberal Fascism? A term that he himself says may or may not be adequate, but it is at least striking. And I think a lot of us are reeling as we contemplate the epoch we appear to be in, questioning just how unprecedented is the direction of this relationship between free market capitalist economics and what we've come to know as political democracy, and what is the quality of shamelessness in public discourse, and have we seen it before anywhere? So we're hoping for some orientation, specifically through the themes of today, which are today's theme, what are network states, and tomorrow, a global world of local traditions. And Slavoj didn't answer when I said, how many minutes will he speak for, and will there be questions? Although you did just say you like the authoritarian aspect of the virtual people not being able to ask questions, but hopefully there will be time for questions from the floor, and if not, just start shouting, rebel at a certain point. But let's go.
Thank you very much. Although I must begin with, as they are used to talk now in the United States, their highest representative, listen, Esther, I'm really pissed at you because A, you treated me disrespectfully. You know what I'm referring to. Like, you didn't even care to mention, oh, Slavoj Zizek. No, I'm doctor, senator. Okay, what senator I am? I have freaking flyer senator card, but it doesn't matter. I have that title. That's first. Then second, you didn't say thank you. Notice? So third, obviously you don't want peace within us. Now I break off with you when you are ready for peace. Thank you very much. I mean, it's in my nature, you know, like if I don't begin with something slightly tasteless, then what meaning has life? Although on the other hand, I'm starting to change my mind because, you know, our social reality is more and more so vulgar and tasteless. Things totally unimaginable are happening. So that I wonder if this is the right way. We cannot move beyond the vulgarities that we have there. Why? Let me just, before I begin properly, give you a couple of things which it's no longer a joke, or I think one should use jokes for the same reason that I know I made use this motive here already, for the same reason that I learned from my old Jewish friends that there were jokes in Auschwitz and after Auschwitz, because the situation was so horrible that to survive, not to be in total depression all the time or numbness, you needed stupid jokes. I know from a Bosnian friend that there are jokes in Srebrenica in Bosnia about their own situation. That's the only thing I can say, because let me just give you in an improvised way a couple of things which really made me depressed. You know what is happening? Did you notice this, how we were claiming for years, oh, this is like fascism, authoritarianism, but we were always conscious that this was some kind of rhetorical exaggeration that will shock our opponents. No, now it's literally true. For example, I claimed at the Frankfurt Book Fair a year and a half ago, I drew attention to this link between a certain type of Zionism and fascism. And again, at the origin of this is, as you probably know, a very honest act, a letter published in 1946 in New York Times, a whole page paid advertisement signed among others by Albert Einstein, Hannah Arendt, and so on, where they warn that there are tendencies there in Palestine among the Jews who resemble Nazism. But now this is becoming a reality. If you ask me, it was a minor event, then people say, but unimportant, marginal. I like these small notes. Did you read in the newspaper? I don't know how much it was reported. Even many Jews were embarrassed that last week in Jerusalem, there was a conference. Even some members of the government boycotted it. A conference organized by Netanyahu and his right-wing partisans on anti-Semitism, how to fight anti-Semitism today. Among the people there, people were shocked. You know who is, I hope I will pronounce the name correctly, who is the second guy who will now probably take over since Marine Le Pen was condemned? Jordan Bardella, did I? Okay. But you know, Le Front National has roots in anti-Semitism. The founding father, Jean-Marie Le Pen, was an open Holocaust denier, or at least in this Ahmadinejad style. You know, maybe it happened, maybe not. We need more research and so on. Now, and there were some other people from the extreme right. But this is what's happening now, that it's literally coming to a pact between Western European extreme right and at least some trend in Israel. And it's clear why, because they both have the same racist agenda. For both of them, Palestinians or Arabs are a threat, and so on and so on. But what really worries me is, if this is not a horror, then I don't know horror is. Did you notice with the last incident in Gaza and on the West Bank, we are entering a new period of no deniability. When IDF is caught doing something, they don't bother to properly deny it or justify it. They just make some vague statement. I'm not talking so much about this horror a week or two ago, you know, killing of some medical Palestinian person and so on. But that's another. But what shocked me, although it's much lesser, you know who is Hamdan Balal, that movie director who, together with an Israel director, I think there were four, did No Other Land, that movie. What shocked me so much is, you can find it on YouTube, everything is recorded. Settlers are coming, protected by soldiers, police. They beat Palestinians. The guy, co-director, just goes out. He is beaten by settlers and by police or IDF, whoever, and then who is arrested at the end? Him and another or two Palestinians, him. Okay, it happened. I'm very cynical here. I know so many details about what they're doing in different countries. Like, I don't know if I already told you this story. A Slovene journalist of mine was towards the end of Saddam Hussein's rule in Iraq. and a guy wanted to warn him, don't inquire too much. So he took him to a place. He says, this guy, it's so horrible that even if you tell it around, nobody will believe you. And he saw opponents of Saddam still alive, hanging from down only by the how to call it, they were hanging on their balls. Their balls were linked to some rope to the and so on. And then he said, okay, I hope you got the message. So all things happen. But you know what depressed me? Usually, it's horrible what I will say, but I hope you will get the point. One would at least expect from the Israeli side to say something like, this movie director was there, I don't know, throwing stones or I don't know what. No, they just said, because they couldn't accuse him of anything, they said that he was detained for health reasons, like he being wounded. And then what happened was that his lawyer called the prison. They said, we don't know anything about him. He was chained to the floor for 20 hours and then he was released. Absolutely no explanation. We are really entering this new stage when, again, obscenity is becoming open. It's more and more fully normalized. Here I remain the point that I often make here, a traditional European hypocrite. It's nonetheless better to be hypocritical because then at least you minimally expose yourself to criticism. It's interesting, this movie, No Other Land, because I got caught in some polemics with more radical pro-Palestinians in New York where I was a month ago. And again, a strange thing happened. They opposed the movie. They claimed that, yes, it's a truthful picture of what happens on the West Bank, but that in its forum, it remains racy. Because first, it proposes to enact the idea that above all the confusion, there still can be friendship between an Israeli Jew and a Palestinian. To this, it was easy for me to reply that no, they are not friends in general. It would be, I agree, obscene if the idea was, yes, they are killing Palestinians there, maybe some Jew at another place, but let's just be friends and wander around. No, they collaborate, the two, precisely to show what is happening to Palestinians on the West Bank. So it's not a neutral humanitarian friendship. But second approach, which appears more up to the point, is that, there is an unwritten rule, and I noticed it, that even if you are part of, let's call it, liberal Zionism and admit there are injustices happening to Palestinians and so on, if you do a movie on it, it's never just Palestinian subjectivity. There has to be a good Jew supporting them, not directly just Palestinians. Well, I disagreed with the guy. I said, yes, you made the point. But look about what happened, this arrest of Balal. It happened because of that movie and because the movie got Oscar and so on. You know what I mean? I think we are in such desperate times that maybe while we stick, each of us, to our point apropos specific problems, project, we have to practice, I will use this old-fashioned term from 1930s, popular front. If somebody is ready to really fight for human rights there, you don't go into this, But how far does he go? Does he admit that Hamas is, like for some more radicals, they say the only thing that matters is that you admit Hamas as the only true resistance group. I don't buy this for a simple reason. You know what happened now? And it's again the shamelessness. You know, my old idea, the only guys whom you trust are ex-secret police bosses, Shin Bet or Mossad. I'm more and more convinced of it. Did you read the news that Netanyahu fired a week or two ago, fired the Mossad boss? And I looked into what was behind. The official version was they didn't prepare Israel enough for September 7th attack. No, no, no. They did even warn the government. The point is that this boss of Mossad made nonetheless a much more honest report. The point was, if we don't open some space for Palestinians, for their political sovereignty, autonomy, we are lost, it's eternal warfare and so on. That was behind. Plus another thing, my God, this gets nice. Mossad was beginning to investigate the financial dealings of some rich Israelis with Qatar. And now it came out. Did you read? Now it's not just a rumor. We have the whole chain. One of the best friends of Netanyahu, I forgot his name, a billionaire, was transferring his money to Qatar. And you know where the money went? To Hamas. It's not a joke. Israel was the main financial source supporter of Hamas because they judged in a very brutal way that this is the only way to keep Palestinians apart, West Bank and so on and so on. So again, this just goes on. It doesn't even surprise us too much and so on and so on. What, on the other hand, yes, so that's why I will tell you before you will reach some idiots to attack me. I still have some links among progressive Jews. And one of them, the guy who maybe at some point you should invite him here, he is very progressive. And today in Israel, you can define in a very precise empirical way what progressive is. He's afraid, scared like shit that he will lose his job. It's all around. Yuval Kremnitzer, he is, of course, one of us, Lacanians. What can I say? We are the wise guys today. But he is, you know, I mentioned a couple of times here, Ami Ayalan, the ex-boss of Shin Bet, I think, who also is now totally excluded because he made incredibly, it didn't quite satisfy us, but progressive statements, claiming the source of the troubles there is not Palestinian terror, but the fact that Palestinians don't have even a choice, a vision of how to achieve some kind of political subjectivity, and that the problem is this. And Yuval told me when he visited us in Ljubljana for some talk that he is a distant relative of Ami Ayalan. My God, I don't know if it's safe because now, you know, Israel is like United States. You can be simply arrested, no? But I'm tempted to go and visit him. You know why? Because for me, much more interesting than this comfortable, not for Palestinians, external critique is to meet the guys who were inside and become desperate. No? So what do we get on the other side? And with this, I will stop this introduction. I hope this will amuse you. When I read some text about the lifestyle of Elon Musk, my first association was, my God, he is the new right-wing version of 68 revolutionaries. Literally. He is only possible as the final result, consequence of the 68 ideology. You know what is for me the worst text of Marx? German ideology. It's pretty vulgar. Marx becomes serious theoretician after that with his mega quality reactions to 48 revolution, 18 Brumaire, and so on, and of course, text on political economy. But in German ideology, Marx describes in a slightly too naive way a communist individual like free in the sense of Marx ironically says, in the morning, you do something in your garden, in the afternoon, you practice critical theory, in the evening, I don't know. Isn't it Elon Musk? In the morning, he maybe has some plans on the rocket to Mars or Tesla or whatever. In the afternoon, if it's a modest day, you fire 1,000 or 2,000 people from a government job. In the evenings, I don't know, but I know. You know what I do later? Oh my God, this is pure, almost perverted communism. You know that Musk didn't trust already years ago state schools. So for his 2-3 children in somewhere there, I don't know where in California, he organized a private high school. Professors well paid, but just for his 3-4 children. And he made his own, how do you call it, curriculum. So that there was, especially there were, I love this, no foreign languages and no music. What's wrong with music here? You know, I almost am tempted to answer him like a right-winger. What about patriotic songs? Like, where will they learn this? I mean, then, of course, there are his children, 13, 14, now each with a different woman, of course, you know. Isn't there something in a perverted way communist in this? I do this, I do that, and so on, you know. So that was the point of my text. Now I will, don't protest too quickly. I hint at this in one of the texts mentioned kindly by Esther, on the network state. And here I come to a suicidal mistake that I made. I did something very stupid. I sent you 3 texts which perfectly, my God, how stupid I am, perfectly cover the central line of argumentation of what I wanted to do here. Network states, the first one, and then tomorrow, that one about local culture, global, blah, 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 whatever, and also the other one, which already appeared some time ago, about the madness of this Musk, Trump's reference to common sense, and so on and so on. I hope if you didn't, you all got this text. I propose that we leave, if you want, I will have things ready, that we leave, that we do it like this. We leave this topic at its general level for tomorrow, and maybe we even begin with you. If you didn't already read them, you ask me precise questions. The basic topic is clear, of course. I try to make a little bit more clear, as Esther said. I mean, why liberal fascism? No, I'm not as sure as Yanis Varoufakis, for example, techno-feudalism. There are so many things different, you know. What we are getting today, that's why I opted for the term liberal fascism. It's not, although now we are getting it, it's not the standard authoritarianism. At some level, at a first level, it's liberalism brought to extreme. And that's the tension, but I develop this more in my text. Uh, uh, so the main ideological contradiction, but unfortunately this will not ruin Trump. I think if he will properly manipulate it, he can thrive on it. Is this open contradiction, or rather antagonism? On the one hand, this conservative, neoconservative populist return to roots, you know, represented by, I call him ironically, the, what's his name? My God, the Steve Bannon, let's call him ironically, the leftist Trumpian, and he is in some sense. We have to admit this so that we understand why people vote for Trump. You know that Bannon was fired after 2 years from the White House during Trump's first 4 years of presidency because he went pretty far in his demand for more workers' rights. He is not known. He supported trade unions. He wanted taxes to be raised for the wealthy to 40%. Not even Bernie Sanders does that. So on the other hand, we get this, what Varoufakis calls techno feudalism, whatever, new oligarchs. And why did I emphasize so much then? Because I claim that their idea, which is rarely put open, is simply incompatible with this populist neo-fascism. It's an idea of such a radical new technocracy that it's even too much for the most Stalinist communists. The idea is, as you find in the name, that network state, which means don't try to change gradually society, either through a new dictator, and some of these guys already predicted what Trump did. They said the only chance is that in United States that when a president, a good one, our guy, for them Trump, is democratically elected, he proclaims state of emergency and does it. And that's what? Totally reconstruct the entire society from the 0 point following this new pseudo-liberal, but at the same time extremely authoritarian measures, what Trump is doing now. And what I found fascinating is that there was a guy called Srinivasan something, you find references in my text, who developed this idea. He said, we can create new music, new band, new product. Why not create new state? And he developed very nicely this idea that you get from a state in whatever way, occupation, contract, part of the territory where you build a society through some kind of enlightened monarch supported by good artificial intelligence technocrats. And I think this is the key, because people then stop me at this point and say, but you are dreaming. No, this is what Trump tried already to do in Gaza. You empty the terrain, and then you get this Gaza Trump. From the 0 point, you construct a society. Now, some of my leftist friends think this is an antagonism that will ruin Trump. I'm more of a pessimist. I'm not so sure, but let's not lose time by this. My point is that the old one, maybe already made it here, my basic point, that while Trump, in his inaugural speech, justified his measures by two key terms, common sense and insanity. Common sense tells you that in nature there are two sexes and all the other stuff. It's insanity, LGBT plus and all this stuff. That my point is, I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself, that it's not simply that this is an illusion in the sense of we cannot go back to what was common sense till now. It's a very sad, depressing paradox that Trumpian actual politics decisions imposed on behalf of fight against insanity and common sense and fight for common sense are politics which will usher us in a world where all our old rules of common sense will be abolished. Look, for environment, Trump is simply denying it. What will happen, I don't know. Sexual liberation or whatever we call it. Trump return, and what really worries me is this vision of artificial intelligence technocracy. Here, Trump is fully aware of the importance of it, and here things get complex. But again, my point is that while Trump is publicly advocating common sense fight against insanity, he is ushering us into a world where precisely common sense will disappear. Because in a way, this is true. Look at ecological crisis. What does common sense tell us apropos environmental threats? Yeah, but nonetheless, nature is much bigger. Don't be too nervous. Look out. There is sun. There are flowers blooming and so on. Nature will somehow recuperate itself. My cynical supplement theories, of course it will, but maybe without us. No place for us in it. Or with artificial intelligence and so on. I think that all these things confront us with something which surpasses, cannot be even properly confronted or analyzed by means of our common sense, because our common sense tells us we humans are active, nature is an inexhaustible background of our activity. It's no longer true, and so on and so on. And here I had a meeting with Yanis Varoufakis. I even forgot where was it, a couple of months ago, where I didn't want to confront him too much, but later we had a friendly conflict where maybe you read my text. Unfortunately, it was payable. I don't know why. I'm ready to send them all to you. On Substack, you know, I accept basically the idea of Yanis, which is that Trump and Putin, even when they appear to be in conflict, they basically speak the same language. Did you notice how Putin immediately has shown understanding for Trump's green light idea, claiming, but we also have interests in Africa, because it's crucial what is happening now. Russian soldiers in the middle of Africa, and so on. So they speak the same language, which is, I've written about it, but to amuse you, I will repeat it's not even a joke. I don't like Orwell's 1984. I think it's a flawed, wrong image of future totalitarianism. Because first, this ridiculous old-fashioned idea that to have a sexual link with a woman is subversive, not in today's universe of perversion. No, I'm very romantic here. I think that today, no sex, but if anything, love is considered suspicious because it's not dynamic enough. And I consciously, with all my evil sense, use this term. Love couple is binary, as some politically correct guys told me. So if we talk about multiplicity, non-binary logic, why not also in sex? So what I think is that here Orwell sounds very naive when he advocates this idea of an love relationship as something subversive and so on and so on. No, but what is practically almost true today, admit it, is, you know what the situation on Earth, according to Orwell in 1984. There are three mega states: Oceania, Eurasia, and East Asia, I think. Each of them composed of a big state which controls the land around itself as its own territory. Aren't we gradually approaching this? United States has its own territory. Russia also wanted to have it. Interest to the south, to the west, not just Ukraine properly. China, a little bit of that, although with China it's more complex. And the problem of Europe is, of course, that it doesn't fit into this scheme. Like, who will get Europe? I think it's maybe even seriously to consider that Trump and Putin will somehow try to divide. So now I will tell you something. You will get here my real political worst stance. I think that in spite of all problematic things about China, and recently I've written a text about that, because Varoufakis still thinks China is different. Yes, it's capitalist and so on, but within certain measures. Did you notice, if this were to happen in the developed world, this would be headlines. What happened about a month or two ago in Zambia? You see, we don't get cruise. It's mega news. Zambia has one big river, the main one, artery, Kafue River, something, which is the central vein. Well, they water their fields, they get fishes from there, they drink water from there. On the top of this river, there is a big copper mine owned by China, some Chinese companies. Copper mines have a tremendous amount of extremely poisonous fluid residual. They were protected by a wall so they didn't spill over into the river. This wall broke down, and it's unimaginable. In one day, already more than 100 kilometers of the river down was, not metaphorically, totally dead. You cannot drink it, all the fishes died, and so on and so on. So that's what the Chinese did there. And when the Zambian government protested, the Chinese didn't give a clear answer. Yeah, so accident. But then there is another story about how they exploit workers there. But in spite of this, I think that nonetheless, China is more interested in open trade, less expansionist, because, you know, this old leftist argument still convinced me when they say, but China is occupying islands around its shore. Okay, but look just on the map at where America, United States has its army. Its army officers, yeah, all around. They are practically encircling China. So they have a right to what they are doing, at least at this level. So what I'm saying is that that's my idea, so that you will not think that I'm some crazy academic leftist waiting for a big authentic. That's my reproach to Badiou, who is still my friend. You know, whenever something happened, Syriza or what was Moralista, now it's all screwed up in Bolivia, and so, oh, no, it's not yet the real thing. Yeah, it's very comfortable. You sit there, write your big academic books and just dismiss everything that happens. I think that we should follow today more than ever the old Frankfurt School motto, pessimism in theory, optimism in practice. That is to say, although you know that the situation is pretty desperate, this should push you to be even more active and avoid false choices, like should we be moderate, should we be more violent? No, analyze the situation, just do everything possible. So along these lines, by doing everything possible, in one of my texts, which is my favorite, but will probably annoy you, the text of that global blah blah and local communities or whatever, I do something I'm really proud of. Why? Because I got many negative reactions. That the only proof that I'm on the right way. I try to show how even what appears to us religious fundamentalism is often not to be dismissed. And I begin with Russia, with this long tradition of the Staro, they call themselves old believers, who, from the time of Peter the Great, opposed themselves to the official Orthodox Church. Now you will say these are reactionaries, crazy. You know, when it was their only time when they were allowed to freely flourish, the first 10 years after October Revolution. Bolsheviks immediately saw in them something that simply resisted centralized imperial state power. And it's incredible to see how many ministers in the first Lenin's government were very close to old believers. It's wonderful to see how Lenin himself, when he was slowly dying in his dacha outside Moscow, he learned that there is an old believers group toiling land there. And Lenin was so interested in them that he sent one of his friends there, offering them, and they took it. Electricity, do you need anything more? And followed how they are doing. So, you know, you see what's my point here. My biggest example, if some of you are from Latin America or some people on the web, my big example, you must know it, I've written about it, comes from Canudos. It's an incredible thing that happened in Brazil around 1880, a little bit later. There was a new liberal progressive government quickly capitalizing the country, and some old Orthodox Catholic resisted it, and they did a miracle. Inside Bahia, 100 miles into, they built from nowhere a city, which at its peak had, I think, around 100,000 people. You know who was there? Thieves, criminals, prostitutes, single mother women. And it's incredible. It was thriving. First, the authorities thought, okay, give them 1 year, they will kill each other. They didn't. They had a very intelligent so-called councilor, consejero, leader who maintained peace. It was incredibly successful. So the army sent 3 expeditions against them. They were so strong that they, not the army, the people there, they defeated the first 2, and just check Canudos, which it begins on Wikipedia, and the third one only enabled the army to occupy the city, and of course the politics was kill them all. Kill them all, but what was so shocking was that we got there Catholic fundamentalism at its best. They didn't care even what religion you are of. They just wanted to organize their community outside the legal framework of state, which was pushing for brutal capitalism. And again, it was almost this dream coming true, how all the poor, homeless people, prostitutes, and so on, and nobody bothered them. There was no moral pressure on them. They just kept peace. My God, it's nice to hear that things like this happened. So what I'm saying here, that sometimes even what appears as religious conservative fanatics can be of use. Why? In what sense? In my old books, I draw this distinction. For example, what I like, in spite of all their horror, about Amish or Tibetans, is that it's so fundamental and nice. They don't have resentment and envy. I spoke in India with some Tibetans, and they don't think like, oh, you whites are doing horrible things, fornicating, blah, blah. No, they said, you live your way, we live our way, we think we discovered the truthful way, it's your problem. If you leave us alone, we might collaborate and so on, and it's the same with Amish people. I don't idealize them, like among the dark things, they had the highest rate of, how do you call this, father screwing his daughter, intra-family incest. But nonetheless, they don't have this logic of resentment. While the moment you are dealing with this state-sanctioned pseudo-fundamentalism, you get resentment. You always envy the others, like the primordial American fear of new fundamentalists who are fake. What are all these gay people and LGBT? Your dirty imagination immediately explodes, So you see my point. Let's be faithful to our principles, but at the same time, absolutely pragmatic, opportunistic. Whoever comes and agrees with our basic orientation should be welcome. Okay, after all of this, now, my God, how fuckingly time is running. Where are we now? It's there. My God. Okay, I will nonetheless go on a little bit because it's very interesting. And although I will use some part of the old stuff, it's not, haha, you don't have it. So it's from the 0 point. Since we live in these horrible times, I will try quickly to go through in today's time through the problem of truth and lie. This is a central problem today. Whom do we trust? Is there objective truth? And so on. And what you can discover soon is how the faked cancel culture left and political right, they are both historicists, relativists in a bad sense. Okay, so my topic will be, if you allow me, let's say half an hour and then we go on, will be the so-called liar's paradox. You must know it from philosophy. Statements like, everything I am saying is false. Now, if this statement is true, then it's false, because at least this statement claims something that cannot be true if this statement is true. No, everything I'm saying is false. No, this statement is not false if you say this. We know how, for example, Bertrand Russell tried to solve this problem with, I think, way too simple way of simply distinguishing levels. That a statement about a set of things cannot be itself part of this thing. A statement of something is at a different meta level, then you avoid this contradiction. But I will not go into this stuff. It's boring. Logical problems. I think that, and this is very useful today politically, we should turn here to Lacan, Jacques Lacan, who offers a couple of times in his text, here and there, a unique, easy, and clear solution by way of distinguishing between the enunciated content of what you are saying, simply the content, what you are saying, and and the subjective stance implied by this enunciation. Like you are saying something, but the way you are saying it can, and as a rule does, imply another stance which contradicts the content. The moment, I think, the moment we introduce this distinction, we immediately see that a statement like everything I say is false can itself be true or false. If you are, these are naive terms, but here we should not be afraid and use them. If you say, if you are honestly in despair, if you discover all my life I was awake a shit. So if you say everything I'm saying is false, it can be an authentic statement of despair. My God, I screwed up my life. But it can also be the opposite. Things are very refined here. If you say, I know I am a piece of shit, it can also be the highest lie at the level of enunciation. Why? Because if you say, I know I'm a piece of shit, you imply that by saying this, there is nonetheless an honest part in you. Like, I say this so you see, I know who I am, so I'm not totally a piece of shit. I'm at least honest about myself. Our reply to this false version should be, I think, a paraphrase of the well-known Groucho Marx saying. He's famous. This guy looks an idiot, talks as an idiot, but this shouldn't deceive you. This guy is an idiot. We should say, you act like a piece of shit, and you admit you are a piece of shit, but this will not deceive us. You are a piece of shit. No, I know. Years ago, I developed this, mentioned this. In what sense? That this happened to me. He is dead, forgotten. I will not tell his name. We had half a century ago, when I was studying philosophy, a professor who was professor of analytical philosophy and probably was informing secret police. These were more harsh communist times about what the students are saying. And once he was drunk and he even admitted to me, I know I'm a piece of shit, but so what? I survived and so on. I didn't. But I was tempted to tell him, yes, you are a piece of shit. So why are you saying it then? It was true. It's the same with, it's the same with, it's the same with, sorry, am I here? Yeah. It's the same with, we find, similar paradoxes in our rightist populism. I think we cannot even imagine the functioning of today's rightist populism without these paradoxes. Let me give you an example which fascinated me. No, I didn't mention it here, if I did correct. After Trump was re-elected in, when was it, October, September, I don't know, 24? November, sorry. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who retained her seat in Congress, through some analysis, I don't know how she got this data, discovered that many of the people who voted for her at the local level voted for Trump at the federal level. So don't ask me how he got names of many of these people, but she wrote a letter to them, a personal one, asking them how can you do this? Aren't our politics totally opposite? And it's interesting what the answer she got. It's that, and in a way they were right. It's that the impression of ordinary people, you and maybe Bernie Sanders on the left and some Trumpians on the right are the only people who appear to say what they really mean. While all the centrist Democrats are extremely calculated, cautious, not to disturb anyone. Uh, uh, and which is true. I remember the unfortunate, now it's easy to make fun of her. Kamala Harris, just before elections, she was asked, I don't know on which network, like the usual question, what would do Gaza, blah, blah, blah. And it was immediately visible on her face a trace of fear, like, my God, I'm afraid to say something wrong. So neither should I appear pro-Palestinian nor pro-Israel. So she said something incredibly flat and void. To a concrete answer, what would you do as a president with regard to Gaza? Her answer was something like, it's very sad when people are killing each other and I will try to stop it. You know, that's why she was losing votes, while both Trump and Kamala avoided this. But the paradox on the other side, and here we are again at the distinction between enunciated content and enunciation, is that what people misperceive as Trump's authenticity brought him new votes even or precisely because when he was caught lying. Because again, I read other studies where they show how the reaction of his partisan when he was caught, often even within the same speech, with some inconsistencies, their reaction was, you see, he is a normal human being like us. He is not a robot, just disciplined by some advisor. You know, first I will say something more horrible. I, up to a point, accept this. Up to what point? Listen. Listening to this latest, especially Greenland, appearances of J.D. Vance, I'm saying, please, if you are religious, I'm not, but nonetheless, je sais bien, mais quand même, I'm tempted to say I will nonetheless pray that Trump will survive. Because if Trump dies, we will get Vance. And Vance is much worse. Trump is an opportunist, change. You can negotiate with him. Vance is a totally manufactured robot. Listen to him. He doesn't even make the appearance to actively think. He identifies with a certain stance, which is totally determined by those who trained him. He was, you know, literally created by Peter Thiel, that mega billionaire, who controls his career from the very beginning. He is a much worse horror, I think, than Trump. But what I'm saying is that Trump, again, consciously allows himself to be inconsistent. You remember, at some point he said Zelensky is a dictator in Ukraine. Then now, a week ago or two, he said, I'm pissed at Putin for saying that Zelensky is not a legitimate, and so on. But that's what brings him votes. Because that's the tragedy. This inconsistency is perceived as a sign of authentic spontaneity at the level of enunciation. In some sense, it is. in some sense, now I will do something really evil. Maybe I will write it, but then goodbye, United States. Because, it already happened to some of my friends. It's no longer a joke. You can be rejected, refused entry, no? Because Hannah Arendt, I forgot which text of her, I think it's a text from the late 30s, has a pretty good analysis of the difference between, do you know a little bit about early years of Nazism? The difference between SA and SS. SA were these violent, brutal street fighters, the brutal, popular side of Nazism. They were beating Jews illegally, breaking windows, violent, obscene, dirty. While SS were this, in nice uniforms, cold executioners, no passion in them. And I think that maybe if Vance takes over, it will be like a passage from SA to SS, not described by. So I'm much more afraid of this, because as Hannah Arendt says, there is almost something human in their obscenity itself of SA. Because this dirty opportunism, empirical evil is human. While, again, SS were much more inhuman monsters. So by spending so much time on this, I wanted to make clear another thing. I hope you will agree. That when I distinguish between enunciation and enunciated, I'm not simply saying the enunciated content is lying and the position of enunciation is authentic. No. The most refined lying is lying at the level of enunciation. What you say can be true, but the way you say, the context into which you put it, and so on, makes it a lie. What do I mean by this? I will here return to my old idea, which is very close to me for personal reasons. I know I developed this here a couple of times, between two complementary forms of lying, which I think follow nicely the distinction between hysteria and obsessional compulsive neurosis. A hysteric tells the truth in the guise of a lie. What it says can be literally not true, but the lie expresses in a false form an authentic complaint. For example, I found an example, you find numerous examples from French Revolution and in October Revolution. Revolutionaries themselves believed in rumors or were spreading them, which were, as it is now undoubtedly proven, not true. But these lies nonetheless mobilized them for the right cause. In French Revolution, it was the idea, which is proven false now, that it's the idea in the French Revolution that that the rich are organizing a big hunger, starvation, burning fields, and so on to make people starve. It was not true. Or in October Revolution, it was similar. So you can have a lie, but a lying which nonetheless sustains an authentic complaint. Then you have truth, lie in the guise of truth in the guise of a lie, but you can have also the opposite. What you are saying is all literally true, but the way it is formulated, it serves a lie. Let me give you, for example, now this will shock you, but I think to really fight racism, we have to take this into account. When you hear about something on M, I forgot, in Brussels, which is a suburb, Moles, which is occupied by Muslims and so on. I know. I have friends who were there. It is to large extent true. To some extent, I will not say large extent. So don't simply say, oh, this is Murdoch or whoever, it's now the symbol, right-wing press. But it serves a racist purpose. It gives you a false perspective on it. Now I come to my personal example, which is telling the truth, which again, it's the same example. Where do I enter? I know I repeated here, but this many times. When I was in psychoanalysis, because of a personal crisis 40 years ago, I was talking all the time there. All was true. But I planned, all was true, but it was planned and performed in such a way to obfuscate the really traumatic point. I was in an analysis with a Lacanian, which meant I knew that I will be given maximum 5-6 minutes of time. So my problem was how to talk. Now you will be cynical and say, you know how to do it, talk all the time. That's not a problem for you. How to talk all, why did I talk all the time? Not to give the analyst not even a chance to ask me a question which would really hit something in me. You know, I was literally talking like crazy to not to achieve something, but to prevent something, an effective subjective change to happen. So who was that crazy lady? No racism here. I just forgot her name, Taylor Green or what? Oh, yeah. When she said there are alternate facts. In some basic sense, she was right. Don't misunderstand me. Not in the sense of, oh, maybe Holocaust didn't happen or Gulag or whatever, but in the sense that it depends how you present it, how you contextualize it, so that even if all the facts are true, the effect is that of a lie. You must remember this. I use here often this example. Let us say I debate with a Nazi in 36, 7 in Germany, the problem of the Jews. And what he says, all the data can be true. I checked it up from my Jewish friends, and they confirmed it. 60 to 70% of literary critics were Jews. Jews controlled much of the press. Jews controlled many of the banks and so on and so on. But the way my partner would probably have formulated this would serve a lie. So, you know, data are never simply data. I come here to my Marxist point. There is no, this is difficult to accept, but this does not mean relativism. There is no neutral truth in the sense of here is one side, there is another side. Now let's look at both sides. No, this neutrality is always already secretly partial. In concrete social situations, like I will be now very honest against both sides, like in the late 30s in Germany, to play these games, did the Jews also not do something bad and so on, is a fake. The basic fact was the preparations for Holocaust. So you had to tell the story from the standpoint of those who were victims. And it's the same today with Gaza. I'm ready to go very far with how many Palestinians, but more other Arab states did unacceptable things and so on and so on. You know, that's what even some of my Jewish friends are doing. You know, you should understand that, blah, blah, blah. But I say, okay, but then look at one of those wonderfully terrifying, drone images of Gaza, literal. And sorry, you have to take sight there. And that's, I think, the great achievement of Marx, that universal value, or value not in the sense value, but in the sense of universality of factual, of the truth, of what you are saying, and being partial, do not exclude each other. You can arrive at the truth. That was Marx's thesis. Today it's more complex. You can arrive at the truth of bourgeois society only through by adopting the stance of, for Marx, working class exploited proletarians. Today, I think it's the same, but we have to, I hope you will agree, to redefine who a proletarian is. For example, in Zambia, I think what we should do is to follow, to analyze what is happening in Zambia, what Fred Jameson, in one of his late texts, developed, where he said that today exploitation is not just, I worked for a capitalist, okay, then he takes part of the value I produce as a profit, blah, blah. No, today we should expand the notion of exploitation. For example, if we are in a country, or even in countries where many women work, the whole system reproduces itself by the unpaid, apparently private work of the women. How can a proletarian family survive with only the husband working? Because his wife, although not employed, is in some sense exploited even more. Then you get racist exploitation, of course, and a new category, I think it's deeply true, let's call it environmental exploitation. Even if you don't empirically exploit people who live there, I don't like the term, but I will say natives, by ruining their environment, you are in some sense brutally exploiting them. And this is what the Chinese did in Zambia. They didn't employ many of them. It was even worse. You know the story, check it up. Already 10 years ago, conditions were so brutal in Chinese-owned copper mines, conditions were so rude that African black workers, locals, started to strike. Because it was even against the Zambian constitution, which says that the minimal wage would be $200 per month. The Chinese fired almost all of them and brought their Chinese slave workers who were ready to work for $150. So that's for me the horror of Zambia. They were exploited at both levels as traditional workers, plus their environment was ruined. And what I found most sad, that's why you didn't read a lot about this story, is that it's not that. Sometimes they pretend to us, but it's not like that. Africa, Caribbean, there the nature is pure and so on. We go there to enjoy holidays. No, it can often be even worse there. So we always complain how we industrial countries, our nature is ruined. No, we are ruining even more nature out there where it is. So I hope you agree. I was making a very common point. I hope you agree with what I'm trying to say, that today this invisible exploitation of women, it's not formally in the narrow Marxist sense exploitation. An arrogant man can even say, ha ha, I work, you just stay home, yes, and do all the dirty work and so on. No, exploitation of women, ruining of environment. This should be even. It's very nice what Jameson adds, that we have today all entire strata of people who they had a job and they don't just lose the job in the sense of okay, it's up and down, next year I will get it. You all of a sudden pass from employed to unemployable because of the changes in industry, automatization, and so on. You are simply permanently excluded. In this sense, Nelson proposes even to talk about being unemployed as a form of exploitation and so on. So let's not lose time with it and go further into this. I was incidentally, as some of you may have guessed, I was talking about also, but you find this in my old books. I implied here the notion of interpassivity, how I make the other passive for me. I don't make the other work for me. I make the other passive for me. Or the inverted form, I am hyperactive, not really to change things, but to make it sure that nothing will change. And the perversity of today's ideology, a point I often make here, is that even if you appear to argue for the right cause, there is a way to do it which makes it sure that nothing will really change. I think that 90% at least of all complaints about ecology are like that. The eternal complaint and makes us feel good, but nothing changes. Let me go on with these paradoxes. I will repeat here now an old story. I think it's already 5-10 years. The last time I mentioned it here, so I hope. What happened to me, and I will be the bad guy here. In Sasfe, the summer school, I met Judith Butler there. And I made once a vulgar remark to her. Vulgar, in my style, which means vulgar, no? She talked to me about her feminist friend. And instead of asking her, which would already have been beyond good taste, is she also a lesbian like you? No. I used some term, is she also a natural bitch like you? I used the term like, sorry, it's my nature. God created me like this. So then, of course, I had a problem with this. So I called her from the hotel room to her room and apologized sincerely. And she answered me correctly. She said, thanks, Slavoj, I appreciate it, but I wasn't offended. I knew you didn't mean it, so you owe me no apology. What I'm trying to say is that this was from her the correct way to accept an apology. That's the beautiful paradox of apology. If somebody apologizes to me, and if I say, fuck you, it's time to apologize, it means I'm not ready to really accept apology. To really accept an apology is to proclaim it, it's okay, no need to no need to apologize and so on. On the other hand, you can also admit guilt in a false way. I know many of my friends who like to tell me when in a quite justified way, me or others accuse them of something, they said in a formal, aggressive already way, I already tell you I'm sorry, so shut up, it's done. Which precisely means, apology itself can serve as anti-apology. So I think that this is, again, how politics function. Now I will give you another, maybe my last example, the Communist Party of China. And I forgot to finish my line of thought before. In my total despair against this new axis of United States, two friends in power, Trump, Putin, what if nonetheless Because if you watch things closely, here Varoufakis convinced me, if you watch things closely, China is not simply pro-Russian. It always maintains a minimal distance and so on. If I were to be, but I'm not, some kind of European leader, I would say maybe there is a chance in Europe to, against both Putin and Trump. Trump is ultra anti-European. It's not something new. Why do people act as a surprise? Already in 2016, Trump said the main enemy of the United States is neither Russia nor China, but Europe. Did you notice what Trump said now a couple of months ago? He said that European Union was established to, he used the vulgar term, to screw or whatever, annoy United States. It's absolutely clear. So, you know, there are good things about China, in spite of all the horrors, and I'm aware of them. First, I nonetheless love this. China is now, I think, a better capitalist in the sense of giving a chance to smaller mid-sized companies than most of the Western countries. Look at these latest results. Not so much electric cars where they beat Tesla, no, of course, but DeepSeek, and there is another computer program, then there is that's something, I think, with women's breast cancer or whatever. They are doing miracles, a more efficient medicine, tablets, pills, whatever, much cheaper. So, so precisely, if that's the tragedy with regard to what Trump is doing, if we want to save, I'm ashamed to proclaim this word, so-called creative capitalism, a guy comes with the idea, China is doing this better. Second thing, China is traditionally not so expensive. Trying to expand, not expensive. I mean, now you will say Taiwan and so on. That's another point. But I wonder how Trump, with his desire for Canada, would have acted there. He would probably already immediately occupy Taiwan. So I think I'm very pessimist here that strategically Europe should unite. And unfortunately, this is why I think my project is a little bit too utopian. Europe is so deeply already infected by the new populists, you know, that maybe the game is over. I don't know what will happen. And there is another good thing about China. I will be very cynical, that it's far away, you know, like we are safe. We just exchange commodities, you know, because I remember, I don't know if I already used it here, years ago, when I was really young, I spoke with a Czech guy in 1970s, where he told me that they made there, that a joke is running there. Some agency is asking an ordinary Czech guy, what is your first wish? He said that the Chinese should occupy us for half a year. Then what's your second wish? That they should occupy us again. And your third wish again. Then ask him why. He said, each time they would have to move through Russia. In this sense, you know, it's good that China is there. It's much more interested in open trade and so on. So that you will not think that I'm just some kind of a crazy tech. What I would do is at least a very careful, rapprochement with China. I think that this is maybe I'm utopian. You can immediately attack me. And I'm aware, look, that you will not say that I'm bullshitting. My books are now half prohibited now in China. Because there, they follow everything. They learned that I used China as an example of what I now I now abandon the term soft fascism, no? So it's a tragedy. 10 people spent almost a decade slowly translating my less than nothing. Now the translation is finished, and already for 4 years, they are waiting the green light, the permission from Beijing to print it, it doesn't come. Another book did appear, but in spite of all this, one has to be a realist. The only thing that can give Europe hope is, again, a parallel link with China. So another critical thing, you know how they deal with Mao? That's another lie. They admit it, but that's another ideological mechanism. They admit it, but in a purely formal way. You know, they all quote that Deng Xiaoping's formula. Mao was 70% good, 30% bad. Then, with my evil spirit, when I was there years ago, I said, then what if I write for Chinese market a book with a simple title, 30%? No, it's unmentionable. It's not only that, like, it's not that you can analyze cultural revolution or especially leap forward and criticize. No, you just mention it, there were mistakes, 30%, and then pass over. You know, it's this mechanism was called by Freud Isolierung, in the sense of you formally admit something, but you totally isolate it from its context, and it has no effect on your subjective, no effect on your subjective position. Then, if we go further, so that, and then I will gradually stop. Yeah, just 2 points. Then I promise I will stop, and there will be time for that. Yeah. First point I want to make to conclude is that there is another example. I like them, but they are in a way ideological. And we find this in so many pop culture today, that in your explicit ideology, you can be progressive, even communist, but all your vote of jouissance, not just pleasure, but your way of life, is penetrated by precisely the ideology that you publicly criticize. I don't know, he's half forgotten today, but Luchino Visconti, his movies. Officially, do you know that Visconti was to the end member of the Communist Party, Italian Communist Party? He was very progressive. But all his movies are one big nostalgia, sympathy, not so much directly from the old pre-capitalist wealthy people, but for their decadence. The whole enjoyment is how this pleasurable awareness that your way of life is disappearing and you enjoy in it. Okay, you will say, who cares about this? I will give you another example that I already mentioned here years ago. Handmaid's Tale. I don't know if you had the same experience, but I had it already when the book, not even the movie and then TV series appeared. I caught myself in fully enjoying the detailed imagination how the women are tortured. You are not allowed to read, not that, not blah, blah, blah. This growing restriction, quite everyday material, practical restrictions. But of course, you can enjoy it because you can say, but wait a minute, I'm fully aware it's horrible. But the whole logic is secretly enjoying that. And I think in the TV series, it goes even to the extreme. The whole, all, then I thought it's only me. I was asking my friends, they were all telling me the same story. What will they invest? They were all waiting. We are looking. Is there no new way to torture women? Like my friends were so glad when they discovered that they put their lips together, just a small hole to drink or whatever. No, so they couldn't even. But you know, we expected this new modes of. So again, this is another ideological mechanism. Now I want to end up with, in a slightly more optimist mode, all this mixture that I was describing is, of course, part of what people describe as the the death of truth. Today, everything is historicized. You don't know whom to trust, and so on and so on. What I don't like in this judgment idea is that, as if there was a time, I don't know when, before 1980 or before, when there was truth. No. The only difference, remember the years of Reagan, Nixon, Bush. No, it was not truth. It was simply one more consistent big lie. That was, you had the socialist lie, Soviet Union, you had the liberal capitalist lie, and so on. So I am not ready to say that it's a catastrophe what's happening today. No, we are just deprived of the traditional form of the big other, like the one big ideology. Trump, that's the good thing about Trump. He effectively is destroying the foundations of what we consider our Western liberal way of life. And maybe this will push us into inventing a new global ideology which will be less a lie, because you cannot survive without a global ideology. Okay, I spoke too much. I'm sorry. So I will end for today, and I can go on, but I would like to. Yeah. This is always dangerous when a woman says, "Let's have some questions." Fuck you! Who asked you this? Sorry, as I already said, blame God or my parents. It's not in me. Yeah.
So, in response to that long and flowing, moving piece of thought work, who has some questions?
I thought you would say slowly flowing piece of shit. It was this in your mind a little bit in the back. Please.
So
you can also relate to the text.
Yes. So we've got a couple of mics. So we've got. Here.
It's on this. It's on this question of initiated versus the way that we speak and what it means. No, I don't know if you're aware. In Belgium currently we have a new government, and we have this new prime minister who's a Flemish nationalist. So
the Flemish in the good old-fashioned Flemish, like
Flemish nationalist. So his whole idea is, eventually we should split and should be Flanders separately from the French part, no? But now he's prime minister of Belgium.
I will immediately let you ask. Always when I'm in Belgium, I like to provoke people and act as a pseudo-racist. I tell them Belgium is a historical anomaly because of, I think the problem was when Netherlands became independent. Belgium is basically the Catholic part of how. So why don't Netherlands and France simply make a deal, Trump-Putin deal? Fuck off, split it. The only good answer I was given is that the problem is Brussels. Because it's too mixed, but sorry, go on.
I mean, so this whole splitting thing, but now so he's prime minister of Belgium, so he has to represent Belgium, he has to speak in two languages. And one thing that's interesting is that when he goes abroad, let's say to to those in Paris, and he goes to talk around Ukraine and things, he makes a lot of self-deprecating jokes, and he's sort of
That's good. That's what. Good in the horrible sense. That's how it works today.
But I think there is a proviso that is quite crucial. Is that when he makes self-deprecating jokes, they're about Belgium, and when he's making them about Belgium, of course, he's a Flemish nationalist. So in a way, he's attacking the French side by making these jokes. He's not being self-deprecating, he's actually being...
Oh my God, this is so sad. Because an intelligent leading politician would, in a much more subtle way, there is a way how to make fun of yourself, which really doesn't hurt you. Exactly. So that makes me sad.
I just wanted to ask you what you think about this. Yeah.
No, it's a standard. You know where don't want to take miracle too much time, but I would love to go into this because I would love to hear some of these jokes and so on. But not now. No, in ex-Yugoslavia, I have a very good memory of when things were falling apart, and some even communist politicians started to build their big problem was they saw the writing on the wall, no? Like, how will we survive democracy? And to build some kind of a popular base, they started to tell jokes about themselves. No, not about the other, about themselves. And here, if I may amuse you with another joke, maybe I used it here years ago, hope not with you. Here, I again appreciate the Chinese, where even when they have vulgar jokes, they have a surprising, subtle moment. Like, jokes in communist country are not simply jokes of the people against the regime. You have also jokes of the top nomenclatura against the stupid ordinary people. But it is more in China, you have jokes of upper nomenclatura, Beijing, mocking the stupidity and vulgarity of a small town local party bureaucrat. But there is something, maybe I heard it that a guy goes to a big city, local party secretary in a small city, and buys himself shining shoes. And to impress his secretary, a lady, when she comes to bring him tea in the morning after he returns, he puts his feet like this, and because shoes are, how to call it, glittering shiny, she said, I know you have red panties under there today. Then next day, the same, you have blue. And then the third day, here comes the subtleness, and my Chinese friends confirmed to me it's on purpose. Next day, she comes with no. And you know what he does? Sorry, I consider this not exactly feminist, but refined. He said, oh my God, new shoes, but I already see a crack in them. The idea is that he sees what it is, but he has this minimum of respect. Okay, you will say now strange respect, no? That prefers himself to appear an idiot rather than to go into this. This here, Chinese are the best almost in the world. But are you, now comes, then we go on, but are you, now we go to enunciation from enunciated. What are you? So are you Flemish or?
Well, I'm from Brussels. Yeah. So
yeah, but Brussels is mixed. What are you?
Ones who take all the money and like don't do anything, no? But yeah. No. I mean, I vote for Green Party, no? But
you see, you don't answer the question. I'm asking you a racist question. You are escaping into political bullshit.
But what you said also about before, you mentioned Brussels in your talk about Molenbeek, like the suburbs.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course, it's like this. I'm from this kind of suburbs, so.
Well, don't you agree? Because I made a little bit more provocative point that the right way is not just to ignore it. It's not good just to say, oh, this is racist. For example, I was shouted at in Slovenia. We had some problem with Roma. Roma is now politically correct for gypsies, no? Group in Slovenia, and some local people rebelled against them. They didn't attack them. But then I knew a lady who came from that village and said, it's easy for you liberals in Ljubljana, the big city, to sympathize with Roma there, but you know that daily we hear shooting, they're stealing things from the field, they're full of stolen cars and so on. So what I'm saying is that I believe in openly confronting the problems. If you play here these games, it doesn't come out. Now in Slovenia, precisely this, because the state is afraid of being accused of racism, so they do nothing. So things are even getting worse and so on. No? So I think Now I will shock you. It's in one of my local culture texts. I think that we should not be afraid to say, yes, each group, including the whites, have the right to their own way of life. The problem for me with white racism is not we have our way of life and we feel that it's threatened. It's that how this reference to a way of life functions. Is it secretly racist in the sense that it secretly universalizes itself, that you measure others by how close they are to this and so on. So again, I would like white people to become this. We want our safe local way of life. Okay, have it, but don't impose it secretly as universal. You know what I mean? Sorry.
Okay,
Sorry, my worst racist joke. I know what are you Belgians. What are your two most famous features? Pedophilia and chocolate. And even these two are part of the same, because chocolate is to seduce young boys, no?
Where does chocolate come from? It doesn't come from the Belgian fields also, right? It comes from Congo. So
yeah, this you do to support agriculture in Congo. That's your okay, sorry. Please?
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to start again and continue the Belgian theme.
Uh-huh.
Because I also live in Brussels.
Ah.
And I just wanted to add that I think that the Bart de Wever, who's the kind of prime minister, neo-fascist prime minister.
No. But how, sorry to interrupt, how did he win?
He had a huge numbers. He's constituted a kind of.
But does he have a base also in French part?
No, they're kind of equivalent.
Feedback.
He's rejecting the Belgian. He's not rejecting the French. I think that there's this idea that the Belgian actually could represent something more universal. But because he's coming from this side of Flanders, and it's more than just rejecting the French side, it's actually rejecting the Belgian, which would be the thing that
that's always, yeah.
Possibility. Would be sort of the whole, the French and the.
Okay, but I always try to be naively open here. So I will ask now you where he avoided. Where do you stand here? Where you don't have. Yeah, but you know what's the problem here? The whole point of Tito's Yugoslavia after World War II, was to say we are Yugoslav. At some point, this was very progressive. When during World War II, Croats were Ustashi, Serbs, all nationalism strive. This was a crazy move of the communist partisans to say, fuck off, we are Yugoslavs. But then, do you really resolve the crisis in this way? Or is there a crisis? Because obviously Yugoslavia did not. That's why it fell apart in such a violent way. But, for example, what do French people really desire there? If you would do a referendum in predominantly French part, join France or remain in Belgium?
I have a question about France, the country. I think that the Wallons would be the French-speaking ones. Yes, they're also voting more and more to the right. So they also, I guess, have a kind of growing nationalist movement, but it's much smaller than the one in Flanders. It's quite
Yeah, I know.
But I think
sorry, the last question. What about those that suburb with so-called Muslim fundamentalists? Where do they locate them? They don't care. All whites are.
Brussels, but it's like a state in itself. Brussels. So you have Bologna in the south, which is the French-speaking part. Brussels in the middle, which is bilingual, and Flanders in the north, which is Flemish-speaking. And each of them are region, and there's a federal government.
But in some sense, almost say, isn't it possible to do some kind of a miracle there and claim it's wonderful to have a Brussels, which is the neutral terrain, and then it can balance? I mean, sorry, I'm losing.
Okay, let's got two there. I don't know if I'm not catching people on this side, but
Thank you. So I wanted to ask a question because I was in South Africa doing research last month.
You were there, you visited.
I was there, I was in Cape Town.
But did you live there or you just visited it?
Visited there.
Ah, sorry.
Visited there on Human Rights Day. And what I was doing was I conduct research into this and this. Trying to learn how they reconciled themselves through the apartheid era, i.e. getting rid of an apartheid system and using a rights-based system to create a new framework. And I interviewed a journalist there who had been tortured and she had lived in
Tortured in apartheid era.
In the apartheid era. And I asked her, well, what do you advise in regards to what's happening now in the Western world? And her response was that now we're going to really realize what you get when you ask for that reality. That would in itself essentially change the dynamic. So she was quite hopeful with respect to us coming to the realization of fascistic narratives coming to the surface. And I framed that because part of the reason why I was there was to ask the question, really, what is our Salon's law today? Like, what is the law that we should be disobeying? You used the words network states, and in South Africa, they were using the word state capture in respect of corporations taking over control, taking over influence, and taking over influence of knowledge, human knowledge through AI, through algorithms.
But sorry to interrupt you, just to let you know in which direction I would like you to move. Okay, but how is this tech big corporations who capture blah, blah, blah to technology, are they black controlled, white controlled, or neutral, or how do they fit racial divide?
Specifically in regards to the question, it seems to me that maybe actually Salon's law is increasingly in the Western developed world becoming actually challenging the corporation rather than the state. And I suppose the question there turns to, if we're thinking about algorithms and thinking about the mobilization of human knowledge in artificial intelligence, what principles and what value should we be reminding ourselves of making visible in that process? And what's your view in respect of how do we lay those out? And what would you be putting there?
Unfortunately, I often bluff, but I try not to bluff too much. So I cannot give you a precise answer, but nonetheless, I remember, do you remember, was it this room or on the other side, where we had some 2 years ago, a general debate, that Friday debate, I think, and there were two old ladies, very dignified, black, from South Africa, ANC, high figures, and they really depressed me because one of them was very honest and was very pessimist and said that the result of now 35 years of post-apartheid is that South Africa is the country in the world, I don't know if it is a little bit of a rhetorical exaggeration or true, with the greatest divide between rich and poor. And so she even said, I'm afraid to repeat this too much. Maybe she was too desperate, but she said that among quite a lot of poor black people, there is almost a kind of nostalgia for apartheid. The standard of living was the same. They were poor, but there was order because it was a police state, but it now is much more chaotic and so on. So her view was that the only thing that really changed is that the old white ruling class is joined by a new black element of ruling class, but the poor remain the poor. Now, your impression, I'm sincerely asking you, am I right or am exaggerating?
I think it's shocking now. At the same time, I asked that driver on the last day what his view was. He was Zimbabwe asked, so how are you feeling about that tension or that anxiety that people want change sooner? And what I learned was how embedded the vision that Mandela left was by his words. He responded and said, well, Mandela said it's a long walk to freedom. Mm-hmm. So I think there is a patience and an optimism actually within the population, if you like.
But for me, the tragedy is still that as if, and I would love to be proven wrong, that it's as if Mandela or Mugabe, either you are cautious, but then the disparity in wealth remains, or you move fast, but you only create new, maybe even more narrow ruling class as in Zimbabwe, no? We are all looking for this miracle, how to restore some basic racial justice. I will be very brutal here, without almost ruining the economy. I don't have a good answer here. I openly admit it. Because it's not just South Africa. Look to other countries. Like I have friends, it may surprise you, in Nigeria and in Angola. It's a nightmare. The corruption in both of these countries is absolutely breathtaking. The irony of Angola is that there, the left wing, supported by Cuban soldiers, won. And now, again, the gap between rich and poor is breathtaking and so on. It makes me so depressed. But okay, did you?
Can we just go there and then we'll go to Maria? So we'll take you one after another.
But we are privileging the right wing. What about the left wing here?
I was just sticking to
Yeah.
chronology.
So opportunists say so. Yeah. It just happens to be that the right is there. Okay. Please.
Thank you, Slavoj. So I appreciate your comment on that. But I have to say it's quite naive, and I think there's a danger of this way of projection. I think you are trying to find an ideal father figure, the Far East, in terms of this kind of so this kind of like way of understanding China is very similar to how some of the Chinese scholars later in America became disillusioned by the Cultural Revolution and start to, in a cynical way, believe in American dreams. And my question is, I mean, isn't this just another example of disavow? You use the word disavow and so disavow in a Freudian sense that you seem to have built an idealized form of China that you wish it to be, and again, completely based on what you can see here, just like how those early immigrants from China in America. And it is like as if we are building an image of China of today by talking about it. And we are, as it were, in fact, trying to talk about, in fact, not China, but your comments about China are actually talking about Western.
Okay, I am ready to accept this. Just I have some contacts in China elsewhere, but okay, could you be, not taking too much time, but could you tell me or all of us as brutally as possible, please, where I am wrong? I know this is an impossible question for half a day, but where I'm basically, because, you know, I'm also, I just didn't want to go into this now. I'm also very critical about many things in China. Although I must admit that if my books can be published or not, this is not the central problem of China. Who cares? But I know what is happening now in the West. So what do you think about that tendency? Do you know Domenico Losurdo followers? Losurdo is the Italian who simply is trying to doing something, this will be very evil, that I will say now. In the same way that New Right is now trying to re-normalize fascism, at least Mussolini was not so bad, blah, blah, blah. Even if they were bad, if you put it in historical blah, 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 they are doing, especially this guy who really hates me, I think so, because I only know what he writes, Gabriel Rockhill or what, who has a whole series of podcasts. The title is like popular judgment of the people against Slavoj Zizek, no? So, and again, he renormalizes, I met him, I knew him, Lo Surdo. He renormalizes Stalin, no? That because Soviet Union was encircled, of course, this triggered paranoia. Basically, it was the Western boycott which caused this and so on. I think this is a little bit too simple because Rockland idea is this one, that when revolution happened, they thought in Russia, elsewhere, that they will have freedom simply. But then they discovered, my God, the enemy is all around. So against their will, as it were, they were forced into building their own secret police camps and so on. So it's a kind of a secondary reaction. So I know I have friends like Alain Badiou, who is still fanatically he is ready to concede great leap forward, that this was a bad imitation of the West, because Mao even explicitly posited to reach your city country here, to reach United Kingdom in steel production or what. But he still thinks that cultural revolution was a big, authentic event. In my reading, and I really got a lot of hatred for this, in my reading, the real result of cultural revolution was Deng Xiaoping's reform, because cultural revolution destroyed or ruined much of the cultural past. You know, these were not yet times of official Confucianisms. Mao even said at that point or before, if China will not get, the only way for China to progress is to get rid of Confucianism. So can you give us briefly your different, and I would love to hear them, your different basic coordinates?
I don't see massive difference. Power play, Mao's era, and the initial rationale of starting the Cultural Revolution for the internal power play and what is happening here in Western today, and also the re-arising of fascism that you were.
In other words, sorry, did I get you correctly? I just want to, do you think that, in other words, to put it, I'm now simplifying so that I, with my senility, and which means also you can, not you, but you all can follow it. So do you think that what Deng Xiaoping did, not he as a person, but what he stands for, his reforms are the Chinese version of what later emerged here as this brutal neoliberalism, or what? On what side are you there? What is happening now? Let's call it fascization of the civilized, developed West. Who is its mirror image in China? Deng Xiaoping or who? Because you said counter-revolution. Who is counter-revolution there? In China?
But this is, but in terms of about in text.
Yeah.
And I think that that level is indeed similar to the neoliberalism that you're talking about. And I think what is really broken was in the 60s, how French was thinking that the Cultural Revolution and the China would have been an ideal alternative. But that kind of alternative is like, I would say, assimilated or in a way incorporated by the Western, and also in the 80s, starting from there. And what we have now is not fundamentally different from what we are talking about in Western context.
Yeah, sorry, this is so interesting. Unfortunately, we don't have time, because, you know, this interests me so much. My problem is this one. But nonetheless, I know this is very vulgar, close to Deng Xiaoping pragmatism and so on. You know the story, I think I also mentioned it somewhere. Okay, now I can say I will not endanger him who told me this. You probably critically know him, Wang Hui. Yeah, I know. I expected. Okay, but no. I attacked him, he attacks me, but we are still civilized. He told me that he spoke with somebody, I'm sorry if I'm at the level of this rumor of a rumor, who was close to Deng Xiaoping's daughter, who was, when Deng Xiaoping was dying, he was just whispering, and the daughter was the only one who was ready, who was able to understand. And that, you know, when he was dying, Deng Xiaoping, high functionary, came to him doing the usual kiss the ass job, no, praising him, and that one of them was there, and the daughter of Deng told and asked him, "What do you think, comrade," or whatever they called him, Deng, "was your greatest achievement?" They expected him to say it was the economic opening. He said no, that at that point I didn't succumb to the temptation to go to the end, but that the Communist Party retained nonetheless political control. Do you think there is something in those who think that maybe this was the most rational solution at that point? That making a full step into, sorry to use this orthodox term, bourgeois multi-party system, because of a specific situation in China, this would have meant maybe even dissolution, tension between Beijing and Shanghai and so on. So, okay, I will ask you a very brutal question. Please strike back. What I see, it's easy to say pragmatism, but but the result of Deng Xiaoping is that China is now a superpower and so on. You can say it's basically the same, but not quite. Just like what was the other option there? A more democratic socialism or what?
Okay, I mean, do you want to answer or should
Or answer tomorrow. We go on tomorrow if you will be here. But it really, my God, you are all asking me questions from Belgium to China.
Maria, did you want a quick question? Oh, Adson, have you got a quick question?
What we call in sex a quickie, an intellectual quickie. Sorry, it's my nature. I cannot, it's my nature. What can I do? Yeah.
So it's just a quick comment on maybe
Which one?
Even this pragmatism topic in China. I think my reading, which is very unorthodox, is that maybe this secret political agency behind this on the face pragmatism is what I call a takeoverism. Takeoverism is from Lu Xun, which is a early.
I know him.
Yeah.
Luxun, the great writer. Yeah.
It's a strategy against assimilationism.
Yeah.
So this is the key. So
you mean that the China should take over just the qualified progressive things that are to be taken from the West without?
Well, okay, so let me explain the difference between takeovers and assimilation.
Yeah.
Assimilation is just like blind adoption of everything.
Yeah.
But takeover is take everything over and let's decide what to use, what to destroy, and what to display in the museum as a witness of the history.
Yeah.
So I think this is a part that I authentically have some hope in the political agency in China. And I think to your point on,
But who can do this properly?
Yeah, that's a question.
Yeah, sorry.
I mean, like, this is just a silver lining hope. I'm not like absolutely, optimistic about it. But I think you mentioned the point, creative capitalism. But I think it's more about like maybe creative socialism in China, because capitalism doesn't really have this power of justifying itself, adjusting itself, especially in China. So, or over the history of its existence. So there must have been some other force to adjust capitalism, and I think
maybe, well, my honest answer here would be, maybe this is still a justification of our, to some extent, socialist establishment in China. And I know people who are working hard with, some very creative method of, reforming or, restaging what it means by socialism in China, and incorporating with the agriculture and cities and so on and so on. So it's I think my point is this subtle agency of takeoverism, which is still, I think, only possible in
what I know, and I follow here. Maybe you don't appreciate him, my Korean friend Alex, and then it becomes unpronounceable for me, Taek Wong, whatever, no? Where he claims that even when in Far East Asia, China, Korea, Japan, even when they refer to fascism, one must be very attentive how we read them. For them, when, for example, did you read about this? Alex, told me that they found a manuscript some minutes that just after he took over, Mao met the dying old Sun Yat-sen. In around, when did Sun Yat-sen die? 24, 25, I don't know. And that they debated precisely this, takeoverism, what to take over. And their idea was, because this was already the time when Mussolini was in power, when Hitler made his, that fascism would be better than liberal capitalism. But this doesn't mean they were fascist. It meant that they saw, and I have no problem with this, words mean something in political context, that they saw in fascism a certain potential of collective action. That's it. They didn't have another name, because I am, sorry, attracted by this in fascism, that it, at the same time, dynamic, it's not conservative in the sense of let's just keep things the way they are, but it retains a collective spirit. I think I quoted in one of the texts, or I didn't, I don't know, where, for example, even, let's go to the worst of the worst. I read recently an article on how big bank, functioned in Nazi Germany. My God, I was impressed. In this text, I found quotes which say in ordinary capitalism, banks just invest for profit, blah, blah, blah. But he said, now in Germany, the primacy should be what ordinary people need for their satisfaction, and the state should control and redirect the. Okay, it's another thing what this meant in practice. What I just say is that when in Asia somebody proclaims some sympathy for what they perceive as fascism, it doesn't necessarily, it's horrible what I'm saying, automatically mean European fascism. They just detected something potentially destructive in liberalism, and their point was how to take over the progressive, productive dynamic of the West without this social disintegration. I know this is the basis of the fascist project. The fascism, the basic definition of fascism for me is conservative modernization. No, you trigger modernization, which can be even more aggressive than the liberal one. But isn't it now? I'm also referring to you, the other Chinese guy. Sorry. That's why I'm so fascinated. Maybe tomorrow you could tell me more about that. My God, Wang Huning, the ideologist, no? Who, for me, is almost a model neo-fascist in these terms. He says he even uses for himself the term neoconservative. He wrote that wonderful book, I read it, America Against America. He visited 20, 30 years ago America, United States and was fascinated by it, but also saw the destructive element. And his idea is, yes, American dynamic without, and that's why, as I always quote, and I would like from both of you tomorrow, no, to see where I'm wrong. What fascinates me is that he behind, I know how influential Van Huning, he's now the third strongest person, if one is to believe these Western sources. He is, because your president, how do you pronounce it? I'm always wrong. Yeah. That he gave a speech half a year ago, I think, which shocked me because he said that people, the youth is disoriented and so on, So we need to remobilize them. Then when I expected that he will say, read Mao, communism, he said, return to Chinese tradition, Confucianism, and so on. So I find this fascinating, although, again, I still believe as a traditional leftist that fascism, even if it's what I call ironically a soft fascism, in the long term cannot work. But I would like very much also from you to hear what do you mean by this socialist element, because this comes together with what Yanis Varoufakis told me. He was in China. He told me that there is now a tremendous, but it's not public, split within the Communist Party between those more pro-capitalist and some socialist wing, but who are they? And what kind of socialism is this? Is this simply the old centralized? So I don't know enough. I'm open to admit
We
it.
shall leave these questions for tomorrow and beyond. And I hope lots of you are coming back again. And thank you for those.
And to be evil, we could leave many of these questions for after tomorrow, so that fuck off, you debate them when I'm no longer here. No, thank you very much. See you tomorrow. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, but I like very much Belgian and Chinese party. Here you get of the real,
Very
the real,
specific.
very specific. I try to follow it, but Yanis, as usual, Yanis Varoufakis is now in his Chinese space, He thinks China, in spite of all, is something different,
So see you tomorrow. Maria's going to chair you tomorrow.
I know. And
I'm in the audience.
you go to Bath to some night holiday.
No, I'll probably be in the audience. I just didn't want to